Okay, so as I was saying, so here on page 41, 40 to 41. And so again, he's combining, sorry, this is part 2. Sorry, there was the break in between. So we've got, for Kant, then we've got these concepts of the understanding, structures of the mind that allow us to have experience. So what he's saying here, there can be no doubt all our knowledge begins with experience, right? We can't have knowledge without experience. Experience is the justification aspect. In order of time, no knowledge is antecedent to experience, right? But what he's claiming is that the empiricists then are making a post hoc fallacy. Just because experience occurs before knowledge is possible doesn't mean that all knowledge is derived from it. Though all our knowledge begins with experiences, does not follow that all of it arises out of experience on page 41. So then he goes on, the expression a priori does not indicate precisely enough the full meaning of our question. It's been customary to say, even of much knowledge that is derived from empirical sources, that we have it or are capable of having it a priori. What this is taken to mean is that we do not derive it immediately, right? Not mediated by mind, immediately from experience, but from a universal rule, a rule which itself is borrowed from experience. So he goes on to give this example of the house builder. Thus we might say of a man who undermined the foundations of a house, that he might have known a priori that it would fall, but still he could not know this completely a priori, for he had first to learn through experience that bodies are heavy and therefore fall when they are not supported, or when the supports are withdrawn. So what he's saying is, look, yes, we have these initial or primary concepts of the understanding or structures of the mind, four-dimensionality, cause and effect, for example. But we also have, and this is Schrappy's words, not Kant's words, kind of secondary structures of the mind or concepts of the understanding. These are the things that through experience you learn, but at some point you no longer need the experience to know it's going to happen. So these are like the tricks of the trade of your job or something along those lines, where once you've been on the job long enough, you know every Tuesday at 9 o'clock the system bogs down, right? You know that. It started from experience, but you don't need the next experience. You know this a priori prior to the next experience. You know it. It is certain. So just like the building of the house here. Now another thing that Kant is getting at, it has to deal with the certainty thing again. So remember with Plato, we had this rule of the forms. And the forms that the born philosopher could have access to could have access to if they were a born philosopher, if they had the right type of education, then they'll have this awakening experience, right? For Kant, he also has something form-like, but it's not exactly forms. It's the world as it actually is, what he calls the noumenal realm. Okay. But where he disagrees with Plato is that Kant doesn't think anyone can have full, complete access to the noumenal world. Instead, all we ever have are our phenomenal experiences. But, and so that's sort of in keeping with Aristotle, right? Everyone has access, they just don't have access to much. Kant, remember, is trying to combine the two. So here, even though we don't have full, complete access to the noumenal, the world as it actually is, what we do have is we can get closer and closer to the world as it actually is through more experiences and through more varied experiences. So we're never going to get to the world as it is. But the experts, to go back to the Plato and Aristotle discussion that we had, the experts have had more experiences than the rest. The art history professor has more experiences with art than my 4-year-old daughter does. So the art historian then can get closer to that art as it actually is, right? That art as it actually is going to be devoid of all of my bias, right? All of the stuff that I bring to it. It's going to be more objective, less subjective. When you start in on a subject, it's far more subjective and less objective. That's what the learning process is learning to see things and think through things more objectively, more as they actually are, instead of the way that you would like them to be, the way that you think they are, or something along those lines. So we're getting closer and closer to the noumenal world, which then means we won't really have certainty about the world. So Hume is right, Kant thinks. We're not going to have 100% certainty. And so if we're going to limit what we call knowledge only to those things that we're 100% certain of, then yes, this stuff is not going to count. Science we can't be certain of. What Kant wants to say is, we can be so close to certain that let's call it knowledge. Even if it's only 98, 99%, that's close enough to certain, let's call it knowledge. So let's go back to Descartes then. We can only be 100% sure that we exist. Well, I can only be 100% sure that I exist because I'm a thinking thing. I can't be sure about the rest of you guys. But I can be sure enough that I would say I know that you guys exist. I can be sure enough about the existence of God based upon perfection and infinity that I know that God exists. I can be sure enough about my senses that I can say seeing is knowing, or seeing is believing, or something along those lines. So we have this phenomenal noumenal distinction. And this is where it gets, his language is clear but complicated. He wants to call these noumenal objects, remember this is the word out there, these noumenal objects, transcendental objects, because they're transcending each of us. Transcendental object X, for instance. And so he's taking it for granted. He's taking it as a given that stuff actually does exist out there apart from us. Locke's primary substance. So these transcendental objects transcend us. They exist out there. They also transcend any of my particular experiences of them, right? So this is the world as it is. In German, it's the Ding an sich, the object out there, the transcendental object. There's also transcendental subjects, us. I also transcend each of my particular experiences, right? So let's think of it like an umbrella. So each of my experiences are here under the umbrella. But me, the one having the experiences, is the umbrella, right? So this is, to use Berkeleyan terms, the mind, or self, or something along those lines. Kant wants to call it the transcendental subject. So this transcendental subject, then, is taking all of these previous phenomenal experiences, combining them together to get me something closer to the transcendental object. Again, I can't get to it all at once. I can't experience the world at the experiential level, at the atomic level, at all of these different levels simultaneously. I can't experience this board from this perspective, and this perspective, and this perspective simultaneously. So what this transcendental subject thing does is it takes this experience, okay, holds that up here while I'm having this experience, combines the current experience with the previous experience, anticipates certain things about future experiences. So again, my expectations could be supported, they could be disappointed. For example, I could presume, based on my previous experiences of whiteboards, so notice I'm drawing upon experience, so this isn't purely a priori knowledge. I'm drawing upon my previous experiences of whiteboards to expect, to anticipate that the back of this is probably either a gray metal, because I got a metal frame here, or maybe like that cork board type material. So let's see what's on the other side. The big reveal. The silver metal. It might even be magnetic, I'm not sure. Okay. So there my expectation was, came to fruition. I was right. Yay. I would have been surprised if the other side of it were like a purple piece of paper. We're like, whoa, that's surprising. And so this is where postmodern art then picks up on some of these same themes. That there may be a staircase, right? We anticipate, we expect that staircases go places. But if it's a staircase that just leads to nowhere, our expectation about staircases based upon previous experience is disappointed. Oh man, we were wrong. Oops, gee, isn't that interesting? And that's the whole point of postmodern art, is to get us to think of things and look at things differently, to disappoint our expectations on purpose so that we can view it as art instead of as a staircase, or as candy, or as a shark, or as a urinal, or whatever the art object is. Back to Kant then. And so, I don't know, Shrapi at least wonders if this is part of the point of Picasso's art. Is he trying to get to this transcendental object X? So, the figure of a woman, for instance, from one perspective is going to look like she has only one eye, right, from the side. But face on, she's going to look like she has two eyes. And so in order to kind of capture that artistically, this woman then has to have three eyes. 2 + 1 = 3. So not that the actual object itself has three, but to try to capture multiple perspectives and multiple experiences all in one two-dimensional figure may require the three eyes instead of either two or one, the choosing of. And so you can see even the way that he paints the faces and so forth. But back to Kant. This is again page 41. In what follows, therefore, we shall understand a priori knowledge, not knowledge independent of this or that experience, but knowledge absolutely independent of all experience. Right? So that's not the house builder. That's that secondary concept of understanding. He's trying to get to the primary concept of understanding, cause and effect, four-dimensionality, and there are a few others as well. Thus, for instance, the proposition, every change has a cause, although it's an a priori proposition, it's not a pure proposition, since alteration is a concept which can be derived only from experience. So he also gets into this pure distinction with other, right? So pure understanding, pure reason versus practical reason. But what I want to get to, though, is I think the language here is interesting. And again, this is translated from the original German. And I don't know German, but I'm going to get everything I can out of the English here. So this is page 42. He's talking about this transcendental logic. And that's what all of this is, right? This is all transcendental. Transcendental objects, transcendental subjects. And so logic, knowledge itself, is somewhat transcendental. Notice the Platonic undertones here. I just really like the language here. Our knowledge then springs from two fundamental sources of the mind. The first, the capacity of receiving representations. Right? So again, these structures of the mind, concepts of the understanding that our mind already comes equipped with before we have experience that allows us to have the experience. The second is the power to know an object through these representations. Through the first, the object is given to us. Through the second, the object is thought in relation to that representation. And so here again, part of Kant's concern is that he thinks the rationalists have overemphasized the capacity part, and the empiricists have overemphasized the other part of it, the representation part, right? And he wants to combine these two together. Through the first, the object is given. Through the second, the object is thought in relation to that representation. He goes on. Intuition and concepts constitute therefore the elements of all our knowledge, so that neither concepts without an intuition in some way corresponding to them, nor intuitions without concepts can yield knowledge. Both may be either pure or empirical. Sensation may be called the material of sensible knowledge. So all that secondary quality stuff that Locke was talking about, right? The sensation is the material of sensible knowledge. Pure intuition, therefore, contains only the form under which something is intuited. But here's where it gets really good. This is one of my favorite paragraphs. If the receptivity of our mind, the power to receive representations, so this power language harkens back to Locke as well, right? That these primary qualities, these objects out there have the power to produce various sensations in us. If the receptivity of our mind, the power of receiving representations, insofar as it is in any way affected, is to be called sensibility, right? So we're sensitive to it. We have a sensibility about it. Think about Barclay, right, with the car. If a car goes by and you're a gearhead, you're sensitive to that. Your heart is going to be moved and you're going to pay attention to the car passing. Then the mind's power of producing representations from itself should be called understanding. One definition of understanding, not Kant's definition, but it's drawn from Kant, I think. One definition of understanding is the ability to explain it to somebody else. That's the whole point of the exams that I've given you, right? Do you understand it well enough that you can explain it to somebody else? Because what are you doing when you understand? Kant says you're reproducing, right? You're producing representations from yourself. You've done the receptivity thing. There's a different level of understanding between sitting and listening to me blabber on and you thinking through on your own and then you being the one to blabber on. Those are two different levels of understanding. There's a different level of understanding with filling in a multiple choice test versus, oh man, I've got to understand this well enough to put it into my own words. That's a different level of understanding. But he goes on. Again, I love this language here. Our nature is so constituted that our intuitions can never be other than sensible. That is, it contains only the mode in which we are affected by objects. The faculty, on the other hand, enables us to think the object of sensible intuition. The faculty. I love that word. Why? Because what am I considered at Columbus State? Faculty. So what's the point of faculty? What is our role as faculty? If Kant is right, it is to enable you to think. That's what our point is. If Kant is right about what a faculty is, it's not accidental that professors and teachers and so forth are called the faculty. They're not the staff. The staff have a different role to play. The staff help us with our meals and cleaning and so on and so forth. That's the staff. The staff are the administrators. The faculty is the teachers. And what's a faculty for? Enable us to think object of sensible intuition. Understanding. Faculty should be leading you to understanding. What is understanding? The capacity for you to be able to explain the stuff to somebody else. Whew, that's good stuff. There are only then two conditions under which the knowledge of an object is possible. Intuition, through which it's given, and second, the concept through which it's thought. And so in some ways, Kant here is sort of skirting around the subject-object problem. He's saying, look, are there objects out there? Sure. Are we ever going to fully know them? Nope. Can we get a whole lot closer to knowing them? Yep. Why is that? Because of our minds. So he shifts the focus to our minds rather than the subject-object dichotomy thing that got Locke and Hume and others so bogged down. And so what's interesting then is, given this quadrant thing that Kant is doing, there's room for everybody at the table of philosophy. If you want to do analyzing sentence structure stuff, cool, we got a place for you right here, analytic a priori, that counts. If you want to do psychology and talk about structures of the mind and how we understand things, sweet, we just call that metaphysics back in the 1700s. There's a place for you too, that's the synthetic a priori stuff. Mathematics, yep, there's a place for you too. Hey, if you want to do the science thing, biology and chemistry and physics and all of that, and try to get us closer to the world as it actually is, there's a place for you too. That's right here, synthetic a posteriori. There's a place everywhere for you. So for Kant, I'm not sure what doesn't count as philosophy. And remember, that's one of the strains running throughout this course is, what is it that each philosopher considers to be philosophy anyway? Right? For Plato, it's all about education is first and foremost. That's philosophy, getting you to this transcendent thing. For Aristotle, it's the world of the sciences and so forth, and this critical self-reflection so that you can self-actualize. That's what philosophy is. For Hume and for Locke, it's science. Let's figure out the world. For Berkeley, it's about the God stuff. For Kant, it's sort of all of that. It's everything. Go back to the second excerpt here and see if there's anything else I want to pull out of there. before I let you get on with your days. Again, he's talking about sensibility and understanding and reason toward the end. Page 113 is where he makes specific reference to Hume. The complete solution of Hume's problem turns out to be contrary to the opinion of its originator. Again, cause and effect happens first before the events. It shapes the way that you experience the events. In fact, when we regard the objects of sense as mere appearances, this is the middle of 113, as they are, because they're phenomenal, they're not noumenal. As mere appearances, we thereby at the same time confess that a thing in itself lies at their foundation. There must be a transcendental object X out there which is producing these sensations in me, which is allowing me to have this particular experience that I'm having. Because again, it is this two-way street, it's this combination, it's this relationship between the thing out there and me, the thing experiencing the thing out there. The manner in which our senses are affected by this unknown something. Our critical deduction does not by any means exclude the noumena, but rather limits the principles of aesthetic in such a way that these should not be extended to all things, but should only be valid of objects of a possible experience. Essences of the understanding are hereby admitted only by the emphasizing of this rule, which admits of no exception. What's the rule? That we know nothing definite whatever of these pure essences of the understanding. Neither can we know anything of them, because our pure conceptions of the understanding, no less than our pure intuitions, concern nothing but objects of a possible experience. In short, mere essences of sense. Right? So he's saying, look, we're never going to have it all completely figured out, whether it's the noumenal world or this transcendental subject X, because as soon as I start thinking about thinking, as soon as I start focusing on the mind and on the self and on the umbrella instead of each particular thing under the umbrella, now that becomes the object of reflection in much the same way that any other object would be an object of reflection. So even when we're talking about this transcendental subject, we don't necessarily have exclusive access to it. There's always going to be aspects of us that we don't really understand. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try. Stephen Colbert, I think I've referenced this before, Stephen Colbert, when he was the interviewee instead of the interviewer, and the interviewer was Neil deGrasse Tyson, had this conversation about, is it better to know or to not know? And they both agree it's better to know. Sure, knowledge is awesome. But Stephen Colbert said, but there's also a place for beauty in the unknown, in the mysterious. And so there was another author, and I forget who it was, who said that if we ever do figure it all out and have all-encompassing knowledge, that's a sad day, not a great day. Because then where's the place for beauty and for mystery? It's gone. We know it all. Now what do we do? That it's the lack of understanding, the lack of knowledge that pushes us. That's what progress is. Hey, we figured something else out. Sweet. So, for next time then, probably try rereading Kant first, in light of what I've told you guys here. So try rereading Kant, and then Monday I'll try posting another video about Hegel. And so Hegel is as difficult, if not more so, than Kant, but for the exact opposite reason. Kant defines everything so precisely. Hegel defines absolutely nothing. Now, you guys did already read the Heidegger. We already talked about Heidegger, so it'll be a little bit easier for you to kind of understand what Hegel's doing. Hegel predates Heidegger, but Hegel's going to be focused on this self-transcendence, self-actualization stuff too, which is also why he doesn't define much. I'd warn you against putting too much stock in Cottingham's intro to Hegel, because I think that Cottingham gets a lot of it wrong. Remember, Cottingham is trained in the analytic tradition, and Kant really is the last figure that analytics and continentals and everyone study and talk about. Hegel begins a particular schism. He himself is not the beginning of the continental movement, but he anticipates it because he doesn't define much, because he doesn't do the let's analyze sentence structure stuff. No. He's more about what does it mean to be and what does it mean to exist. So he lays the groundwork for Heidegger. All right, thanks. See you next time.